Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.
And I listen to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast.
The best laid plans of mice and men, people. Of course, I had Kimar on mute as I played that video. But as you know by now, if you're a fan of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, that was Kimar Roach saying, welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and so on and so forth. Welcome to another edition of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, people. This is episode 80 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and such is the shoddy nature of the start of this episode that I forgot to bring on my partner in crime. Santoki. Santoki, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Mash, and we're excited to have our guest on today's episode. I mean, his recent appointment notwithstanding, Mash, I know you've been messaging me for the longest time saying we need to get this guy on our podcast because I think in terms of coaching and extensive knowledge on the region, I think you'd be hard to find someone with more experience and understanding of the development structures in the region than the guest we have on today's show. So without further ado, Mash, do you want to introduce to the public who have we got on?
Yep, we pride ourselves on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast of talking to all the key stakeholders around the region at various different levels of the game across the different, whether it be boys, girls, males, females, from Cricket West Indies down to regional coaches, down to people on the board, down to people running the cool and smooth T20. We want to talk to everyone across the region with regards to all the different kind of structures in West Indies cricket. And we're delighted, to be honest, on episode 80 to get on the current interim head coach of the West Indies men's senior side, Andre Coley. So without any further ado, Santoki, let me bring him on fresh off the first test, no less than 24 hours ago. He hadn't even had his time to do his cool down and stretches. Straight into an interview after the end of the first test with Zimbabwe. Let me bring him on. Andre, how you doing?
Hey guys.
Perfect. I think the audio may be bits and pieces. Let's just try that one again, Andre. You can hear us? Everything's cool?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're all good. We're all good. That much better than second time round. So Andre, listen, people are going to crucify us if we don't talk about the first test match. So I'm going to do this. The easiest way. Let's just get that out the way from the jump so that we can actually talk about you, your career, and everything straight afterwards. So, like I say, 24 hours out, maybe a tiny bit more out from the first test match, a grueling 5 days. Pretty much a day was lost to rain when you had a pool of the overs that were taken out of the game. Well, as hard as it might be, what's your immediate reflections on what is your first test match, in fairness? Never even mind the players, just what's your immediate reflection on the kind of, as interim head coach, the test match with Zimbabwe?
Well, I enjoy the test match. It's depending on who you would have a conversation with, that person may say that test cricket is dead. But if you were to follow all 4 days, barring the weather, if you look at the fact that both teams declared, and a number of times, and that was really driven by the fact that either team was trying to get a result to win the game. So to say that test cricket is dead, I mean, that test match was a good indication that you can have a lot of energy and a lot of good cricket being played. So yes, I actually enjoy that. Unfortunate, we weren't able to pull off the win, but I thought in the end we were in a very commanding position.
Just out of interest, because it can often be the hardest thing to assess when you're watching cricket on TV is what the conditions are truly like. I mean, you can see a scorecard and you can see people scoring hundreds, you can see wickets falling, but just from someone who is actually there on the ground, was it a flat deck? Was it something that more favoured the batters? Did bowlers have to work very hard to get wickets? How did that pitch play for you?
It's an interesting question because, I mean, if you look at the number of runs that were scored in the match, just by a glance, on, as you said, on a scorecard, it would suggest that it was a very flat track. And to be fair, it really required a lot of application from the batters. And whilst it may not have had offered a lot of spin, for instance, or a lot of pace, there were occasions where it kept low and there was some bounce on offer. And because of this, the tactics of both teams, if you look back to the test match, I believe both teams generally bowled as straight as they could, just because of the nature of the pitch. So yes, it really required good application from the batters throughout the innings, but it also required discipline from the bowlers. Just being fair with themselves to actually understand that on a track like that, it would have gone for some runs, but that a disciplined approach would potentially over time bring the results that he wanted. So that is why I really enjoyed this test match, because it was really a true test of discipline, true test of skill with bat and ball.
Mm-hmm. Just one further thing to add up. Obviously, we've seen with Brendan McCullum in England, he's implemented a philosophy which the media have called Bazball. Do you have a sort of philosophy and vision which you'd like to implement within this test side? And if so, what is that?
I believe this is something is still in its formative stage, and it is something, regionally where, we want to get to. I mean, our style of play, West Indians are known for being very dynamic, in any part of the game, electrifying fielders, we hit the ball a mile, we've been known for our fast bowling and spin. But in our team, because of the versatility that we do have, we want to be able to put ourselves in a position as much as possible to keep the game moving along. And that is really our philosophy. Every time we play a match, the mindset must be about trying to win the game. And at each juncture, how do we win a game? So you saw in the first innings, for instance, where there was some adjustment made to the order because we thought that we wanted to move things along, score at a faster rate. In the second innings, we reverted to the original order. That's really the mindset, that we have. We really want to make sure that we play a dynamic brand of cricket that keeps the game alive and keep it moving forward. Where in the end, the desire is to actually to win each match.
It's interesting, Andre, because when you would have been appointed interim head coach, dependent on how well people know the domestic scene in West Indies cricket, and that I'm talking about people within the Caribbean or outside of the Caribbean, I feel like you've done everything that there is to do.
I doubt that anyone can ever say that they've done everything.
but from a coaching perspective, I mean, prior to this appointment, you were working with the West Indies Academy. You've done a stint with Windward Islands. You've worked with West Indies women senior side, Jamaica Scorpions. You're now with the men's senior side. So I think at this juncture, it'd be really good for people to understand your journey. And you might think you really want to know about my journey, but people do need to know, Andre, because one of the hardest things to grasp in West Indies cricket is something like a person's personal journey, because news sources aren't out there. And I can tell you now that when you would have been appointed, there would have been plenty of people going, so who is this guy? And trying to find sources of news here, there, and everywhere. So in your own words, Andre, talk us through your kind of journey. Well, actually, you can go from playing the game to where you are now. I don't know how long it's going to take, but but the floor is yours to tell us all the same.
I think in a phrase, I would describe myself as a homegrown coach. So as you mentioned, I would have played for Jamaica, played a handful of first class matches, list A matches, and then got into coaching reluctantly, so somewhere around 2005, 2006, with my background being wicketkeeper batter. I was asked I think back then by Jeffrey Dujon, who was director of cricket, to assist with a wicket keeping camp. And I actually enjoyed it. Reluctantly, I took it on. And then I enjoyed it. And subsequent to that, I was given youth team coaching roles in Jamaica. So the national under 15s I did for a few years, and the under 19s, which I did for a number of years as well. And then I was asked to coach the West Indies under 19 in 2010 at the under 19 World Cup. So I'd started to enjoy the coaching and taking on these opportunities. And then by nature, most people who know me would know that I would seek out a challenge consistently. So I've always been someone who's consistently tried to challenge myself. And if there's an opportunity to get stretched, I'd pretty much apply for it or try to embed myself in it to see where I was at, and then for the better part of it, if I could add value. So then obviously that coming on from the youth teams and so on, I was involved in the academy, High Performance Center in 2010, which was based in Barbados, and the senior teams, all the West Indies teams used to come through that facility in preparation for international tours, and that is how I got my first taste of international coaching when Otis Gibson was coach at the time, and he asked me to join his coaching team. At the time, he had asked me to join as fielding coach, which I spent a couple of years with him. And then when he left, Phil Simmons took up the job. I stayed on, and I thought I really enjoyed that. Stuart Law, I stayed on for a bit with him. And I was actually enjoying that. But I think in the back of my mind, I always wanted the responsibility of leading a team. And when I say team, not just of players, but a diverse support staff. And so I had left that international scene for a while, and I wanted to take on first class cricket coaching, which I did for about 5 years between the Windward Islands. I wanted to step out of Jamaica and try something different culture and so on, which I really enjoyed that experience with the Windward Islands. And then I was back in Jamaica, spent a couple of years there as well, about 3 years there. And then the academy opportunity came up, and I reached out for it, and so that in itself is still within a year, hasn't completed a year of engagement with that. And then obviously this came on where this role, and I was asked to fill it. Obviously to be asked something of this nature, I mean, it's an honor to lead your country and the region. So I thought about it, discussed with my family, but in the end, I didn't think that I could step away from it. And it was a time of need, and I felt that it was another challenge that I could embrace. And here I am. So that has brought me to where I am now. But I think just the experiences that I've had in the last, I would say, better part of 10 years, 10, 12 years, which is where I would have spent most of my international exposure, from youth cricket to women's cricket to men's cricket, has given me a wide perspective on where the game is at. And, and leading diverse groups, working with different players. I would have had interaction with every single player in the squad at some point, whether it's an under 19 player, as an academy player, whether through first class cricket. So I would have had some touch point with these players. So it was really I saw it as a good opportunity to take on this challenge, and I've been enjoying it. Needless to say, obviously leading a diverse group at this level obviously comes with daily challenges, but I've really been enjoying it. I've had the support of everyone, so it's been good. So in a nutshell, that's really what what I've done between 2005 and now, across all levels of the game.
Listen, Santoki, I want you to come in on this, but Andre's basically worked with every single player in the whole Caribbean.
No.
Connections in every island.
But it's interesting it's interesting what you just said at the end, though, because I actually didn't know you were the coach at the 2010 World Cup. And then you've just alluded under 19 World Cup, I should say. So you've just alluded to it because I was about to pivot and say, well, if you were coach then, most of the squad now, not most, but a lot of the squad now were probably with you as under 19 players. I'm trying to think.
Yes,
I think
you're
Craig
right.
Brathwaite's year under 19 would have been 2011. So maybe he played 2010 as well with you. So how many of this current squad do you remember working with at youth level?
Off the top of my head, forgive me if I miss one or two, but I would say so. I would say maybe Craig, Jason, Jermaine, would that be it from this group? But I would have worked with them in other West Indies, in previous West Indies teams. So like Shane Dulwich, Shea Hope would have not Shea Hope. That's more around the academy. So from this team, maybe 3 or 4 from that under 19 World Cup, and then from that World Cup, maybe about 7 or 8 who would have been in it at the international level eventually.
Right. So Santoki, take it away.
Where do I start? There's so many places we could start, but I'd be interested to know, Andre, you mentioned you played a few first-class games and List A games for Jamaica in the mid to late 90s. In your opinion, what has been the differences in terms of improvements or a decline in terms of the regional game since your playing days compared to now, having worked in the setup in between those years?
I think the standard, I can remember playing as a teenager, the standard of youth cricket in the region was so high that it was very common for a teenager to actually challenge for a place in the first class team, having come out of the under 19 setup or even before leaving the under 19 setup. So if you think about the SAR ones and the Brian Lara's, Jimmy Adams, Marlon Samuels, so these are some of the guys who were already playing first class cricket and so on as teenagers. And I could remember playing these matches, and if you actually won, so it was 6 teams, 6 territories, so you would play 5 matches. So and at that time, I can distinctly remember if we were able to win at least 1 or 2 of those games outright, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the tournament because the competition was so stiff that most of the games ended in draws. And then we got into and then it took me a while to actually break into the first class setup because the standard was so tough. So I think I started going to the senior trials at around age 17 and 18. I didn't actually play my first and didn't actually debut until I was 23. Just you had to keep knocking on the door. And the standard was so high. So I just believe that if the grassroots of the game is strong, then it actually just speaks for itself. So the levels above will be stronger, and I believe that is where we really need to focus. I also believe that having that academy, restarting that academy, is a good thing. So if we can actually keep that up and running and keep improving on that, as well as trying to find a way to improve the cricket in the schools, getting strong basics and so on. I think that is where it really lies. It's difficult to try to fix it when players are 22, 23. So, but obviously we have the players we have, so we have to work with them as best as possible to fulfill their potential. And I do believe we have a winning group, group of players in the Caribbean right now. But one of the challenges we have obviously is the different formats around the world and availability and so on. So it's very possible that we may not be able to have what we consider to be our best players consistently. But we have, I believe, enough players to be very competitive in all formats. So yeah, if I was to identify one thing, was to strengthen the level below first class cricket, and then gradually chip away at improving our standards in first class cricket. And I believe that within 5 to 10 years, we should see some significant improvement in the standard of our game.
it's interesting you mentioned the levels below, because that's probably a good segue into the work you've been doing in the last, it's not even a year really, actually probably last 6 months, 6 to 7 months with the young men in the academy. And obviously we saw the West Indies academy side in the Super 50 last year, and we saw some promising performances from quite a few youngsters, whether that be a Wickham, whether that be a Keegan Simmons, or whatever it might be. How difficult, so I mean, you've made reference to under 19 in your playing days. How difficult is it for the current crop of under 19, or say under 19s like 20, 21, 22, 23, within that kind of professional environment within the West Indies Academy? How big is that gap? What's the biggest difference you notice between their kind of skills enhancing and then playing in first class matches against the established territory sides? Or do you believe that the raw talent is there? What's the missing gap for some of those players? And it must be said before you answer that we must celebrate the fact that 5 of that academy squad are currently playing in the domestic first West Indies Championship right now, essentially having been recognised by their territories for, I would argue, their improvement. So there are clear signs that the academy structure in its early days is reaping some rewards and benefits.
Yes, I mean, just to touch on that academy program, as I said, it's still in its infancy based on this new approach. It's slightly different kind of structure to the one that I was involved in 10 to 12 years ago, where we actually had a lot more contact time with the players. And in that period, we, initially we would spend about 12 weeks with the players. This one actually, contact time initially was around 4 weeks. And then obviously people had to then get back to the territories to do different things. So, so as you said, it's actually heartening to see some of the players who weren't involved in their first class teams before have actually been given opportunities. And what we have tried to do is that for some of those who are able to, who have been able to find additional playing options or experiences in the game. We have one player who is actually in Dubai with one of the LT20 squads. We have a player in the SA20, who we're doing quite well there. And what we try to do is probably position them in other, if there's other local domestic tournaments that are going on, we try to see if there are clubs who would like to have them on board and so on. But the key is that every single player is, as we speak, is involved in something or is experiencing some kind of cricketing opportunity. So that's what we're really happy about. And as we go forward, the program will evolve. I think it's very important that we don't have that we have a more longer term view of what we expect to happen versus a quick fix because of the rhetoric over recent, over the years, maybe say last 5 to 10 years. I think that is where we are. If we are patient enough and we're willing to hold and have more of a longer term view and able to support these guys over a longer period of time, then we will see, I believe, better results at the end. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, yeah. I was just checking. Santoki, you coming in?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember you're also taking over the white ball tour matches against South Africa, and it's interesting because obviously this report came out with Judge Justice Thompson, Brian Lara, and Mickey Arthur about how West Indies can improve their white ball fortunes. One thing I want to touch on, because you'd be well versed in kind of understanding this situation, is the report recommended that players such as Nicholas Pooran and Evan Lewis should be in the test side. Currently only white ball exclusive players should be in the test side, not only to benefit the test side, but to benefit their own white ball game. Where do you sort of stand on this, and how do you sort of see the pathway? We've talked about players developing in the academy, players who are kind of in the peak of their career. How do you see it, the development pathway, in terms of getting them into the test side when they're currently only white ball exclusive players?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And I mean, against the landscape that we're in now, the majority of our players play a lot of white ball cricket. So whether it's the T20, T10, I do believe, though, that conversations, this solution starts with conversations. Um, and bottom line has to be, are we able to have majority of our best players playing for us consistently? If not, how do we go about it? So conversations in terms of, what the plan is for each year, I think is important, against the background of all these international franchise tournaments, against the future tours program of the ICC, and we actually have a sit down or a telephone conversation or whatever with each player to actually, discuss where each player would stands in our present setup. Come to some kind, get a feel from the player as well in terms of what their aims and objectives are, and then come to some kind of mutually beneficial position, which allows us to have our best players, but then also allow some of our best players to rub shoulders with some of the world's best players, because that's what they do when they play these franchise tournaments. And then we also can't divorce the fact that this is also livelihood of the players. So obviously this is where they earn a lot of their money, away in these franchise tournaments and so on. And I'm sure if you speak to a lot of these players, they really want to play for West Indies. So it's really, I believe it really comes down to the timing of tournaments and scheduling, and then having this relationship with each player where, we're able to know who's going to be playing for us at different times, and so on. But I'm sure that the powers that be will be scouring that report with a view to trying to implement some of those things. Yeah, but I believe it. A lot of it starts with conversations, because then you start to engage people. They feel like part of the solution, and then you may be on one side thinking one thing, but a player may be thinking something else, because he has a completely different perspective, and you can only get an idea of where he's coming from or where they're coming from by having a conversation. Then you kind of see where the alignment is or the misalignment is, and then you're able to then work out how can we then just dovetail things.
So
that's my personal view on it.
Thank you for that, Andre. And I'm going to use that then to follow up with this. And granted, we're in the middle of the test series and we can't lose sight of that. But with those white ball games also coming up in South Africa, you have a chance to also get back into some white ball cricket. And we must remember that, of course, and I hope Santoki will like this, of course, the Jamaica Talawars won CPL last year, and you were part of that setup with Shiv and Curtly Ambrose, etc. And the reason why I make reference to that Talawars victory, it was very much against the odds. I don't think anybody had the Talawars down as a side to win still. Well, put it this way, I didn't, and I'm Jamaican. So I don't think anyone had the Talawars down to win last year. But the reason why I ask you that is, based on that experience around T20, what do you see as kind of, I guess, what was key in winning that competition? And what kind of lessons might you have learned from that particular experience, looking ahead to then having to take a West Indies side into, I know there's ODIs as well, but into some T20 games?
Well, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed that experience. Obviously, you don't necessarily see a lot of the stuff that happens on a daily basis, but there were interesting challenges along the way. And you may not have known as well, but the Talawars would now have been my third CPL team, because I'd spent a couple of years with the St. Lucia franchise, and I also spent a couple of seasons with the St. Kitts franchise when they first entered the CPL. So the Talawars was then my third team, and then obviously it being a Jamaica team was also made in the success even a lot sweeter. But in terms of what drove that success was really the value. So Rovman's power leadership, I thought, was really good around the T20 setup, and he has a lot of experience around that. He's played a lot of that around the world. The leadership group within the team was also quite solid and really rallied together, around each other. And as a support staff, I thought we were pretty close knit, and we really worked behind the scenes to support Shiv as the head coach. And I just believe from the start we had a mission, and it always was brought to mind every single practice, every match, whether it is that we won or we lost. It was never thought that it was, if we lost a game, that we were out of it. We always thought that win these tournaments and you're gonna lose. But we always wanted to take the good things from each game, and if it is that we were consistent, then we knew that we had the players with the skill to be able to win. One of the key things as well, and you mentioned it, is adaptability. So if you think about the tournament and the tournament moving around, so we started in St. Kitts, and I believe we moved to St. Lucia, and we went to Trinidad and Guyana. So being able to adapt at a very short space of time or period of time to the different surfaces, different time, match timings. You would have some games that would start in the morning when the pitches potentially were probably a little fresher, versus in the afternoon, versus the evening where they probably were a little bit drier. So just having that ability and that expertise within the team to be able to adapt to those changing conditions, and then being able to plan out how we were going to go about things, coupled with good leadership. I thought those were the key elements that actually drove our success.
Listen, before I hand to Santoki to try and wrap this one up, I want to get this out there as well. So, and if you don't want to answer this question, Andre, I'm allowing you to say, you know what, pass.
Is this a bouncer? Is this a bouncer? Should I get my helmet? Is this a bouncer?
I'm coming off a long run up here. But Andre, should the team go to South Africa and we do well, pick up some victories that people didn't expect, so on and so forth, and then say the hierarchy in Cricket West Indies turns to you and says, well, we scoured for the next West Indies permanent head coach, and we'd like to actually offer it to you. What are you saying, Andre? What are you saying? You're gonna say yes?
Why? If I had $1 for every time I've been asked this question, why? I mean, let me tell you, the piggy bank would have been busted. But yes, I'll be straight up and say that I've really enjoyed this opportunity and the challenge, and I knew coming into the role that it potentially was going to be something. Being an assistant coach at this level versus head coach, obviously completely different things. And I knew that coming in that it was going to be a challenge, and I've really enjoyed it, and I've embraced it. I haven't gone past March at the moment, just because my focus has just really been on getting to build, focusing on building rapport with the players and staff and strengthening that, and then making sure that we're constantly positioning ourselves to win matches. So yeah, results are really, really important for us, and for me, obviously, in the interim role. So my focus is really just around the next 6 weeks, what's remaining on, in this position. And I feel when that time comes around, and if I'm given an opportunity to make a decision on it, whether it is to apply for it or whatever, then I'll shift my mental focus to that. But for now, it's really just trying to do the best job I can for with the team, the different teams in the time frame that I've been asked to lead and serve.
Well defended outside the off stump. I like that.
Mash, I think with all the insights Andre's offered, I think we could easily make this show 2-3 hours talking about West Indies cricket. But he's West Indies head coach. He's got a plan of victory in the second test against Zimbabwe starting on Sunday. So I think it's perfect, Mash, that he mentioned the different stadiums he visited during the CPL, because that leads us into the big final question, which we ask all our guests on the show. Mash, do you want to take it away?
Indeed, I do. So, Andre, everyone has to answer it. Anybody who comes on for the first time on the podcast, and you're no different, I'm going to give you three. We're going to give you three questions at end. First one, you can answer them all in order. First one, what is the best ground to play cricket on in the Caribbean? That's the first one. Second one, who is the best batter, you have played with or seen in your career? And thirdly, same but best bowler. So best ground to play on in the Caribbean, best batter you've played with or seen live, best bowler you've played with or seen live. That's the three questions you got to end the show.
I think depending on
you might lose your job with these answers, so think carefully.
No, I'm just saying that. I mean, you talk about different conditions. I mean, different pitches in the Caribbean now offer different things, and if you have a good idea offer, then you're able to kind of set things up, your strategy around that and so on. But I would say probably the pitches that would probably offer the best balance in terms of, let's say, a test match and having a result and a good test with bat and ball, I would say Sabina Park and St. Lucia. So Darren Stanley Stadium.
Your first answer wins. Sabina Park.
Why? No, well, listen, I'm a bit partial to Darren Sammy Stadium as well, but I've also seen that. I mean, the improvement of the pitch at Sabina. So I hope I don't get strung up for all of that. For that. Then the next one was best.
Yeah, best batter and best bowler.
Is this from a coaching standpoint or even playing or what?
Whichever way you want to interpret it. You could take both, but whichever way you want to interpret it.
For me, I believe in experiences. So, and obviously you want to play to win. So there are a wide range of grounds around the world. Always, but I like atmosphere, and I'm an outdoorsy guy. I like nature. So any ground that really actually shows that or offers that versus a concrete stadium is really will get my pick most of the times. So, I would probably say I actually enjoyed, oh man. I think I've enjoyed cricket at stadiums with mounds, so like Super Sports Park. I think I've enjoyed. Basin Reserve. I believe I'd have to give it a bit more thought, but I mean, it's not only the result for me; it's really just the atmosphere that's there. So those are the two that kind of jump out at me at the moment. I actually enjoy quite a few of the grounds in New Zealand. I just like the way that they incorporate nature in the ground, and you feel that kind of, almost close to the fans, and the cricket atmosphere is quite good. Which we love that in the West Indies, so we like to be close to that. So, and then it's a best batsman and best bowler.
Yeah. Chris Gale might be watching this one,
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, I think Brian over the years is just the way he's played. He was, the time, teams he was playing in, and he was just so special to score the volume of runs that, and the way he looks scoring it. Chris, I believe, is up there as well because he has runs in all formats. Obviously, Brian would not have played a lot of T20 and so on, but Chris is quite destructive. But yeah, when he's on the go. So yeah, is that tie? I'm probably partial to lefties. So maybe Brian and Chris. Maybe Brian, I'd say.
And then bowler.
I just enjoyed watching Mikey Holding bowl. It's just just the rhythm of the man, and just effortlessness, but almost deadly at the next end with that spear coming at you. Yes, I would say Mikey. I actually enjoyed watching Mikey holding, and sometimes I do watch, just go back and watch videos of him bowling.
Listen, Andre, that's more than enough. You don't have to continue, because I'm going to let Santoki come in and close it. Santoki, what are you saying? Andre said Jamaica to the world,
I was going to say, spoken like a true Jamaican,
Boy, I was trying to come up with the balance, boy. I did say Brian. I did say Brian, right?
Yeah, no, you did.
Yeah.
You did.
He said Brian Lara because Brian's in the next room.
Listen, Santoki, I'll let you close it.
Yeah,
boy, you put me on the spot.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Andre. Thank you for giving up your time to come on the show. Valuable insights, and all the best. Looking forward to the Zimbabwe second test and the South Africa series. So thank you very much for taking some time out to appear on the show.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I really enjoyed it, the time. It's good to have, in a job like this, sometimes you miss the importance of having some laughs as well. So I want to thank you guys for giving some of those laughs. And then I think also just big up your the viewers and listeners and so on. I don't think I recall doing that at the start, but all the best to everybody in the new year.
Thank you so much, Andre, and thank you, like I say, for taking some time to come on. Ladies and gents, that's been episode 80 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you for listening as ever. Thank you, and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.